This is M-Wire, Movie Week in Review. M-Wire is brought to you by Audible.com. Sign up today to get a free audiobook download at www.audibletrial.com/geekcastradio. Start today with a free 30-day trial with over 100,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Don't forget to follow Audible on Twitter at audible_com. And now the latest and greatest in movies with M-Wire.
Hello and welcome to M-Wire Movie Week in Review. This is episode 108. I'm your host, TFG and Mike, and joining me is Jeremy Fine. Hello.
Did you kill my Mr. Church? I love this movie.
Yes, and this is the double feature part 2 of the Thin Man franchise, because this 2014 is the 80th year since the first Thin Man came out. And we are celebrating 80 years of the Thin Man. As we said in the last episode, we are so glad that Hollywood has decided to leave this one alone for the most part. There were those crazy rumors that Edward Scissorhands was going to become Nick Charles, and that would never, in all the roles he has ever played, that would never flipping work.
You know, I had nightmares for a while that Tim Burton was going to direct it and that Helen Bonham Carter was going to be Malloy's character. I just can't picture it. I do know that there was a Thin Man TV show.
That wasn't any good.
Yeah, and I heard rumors that IDW was going to try to do a mini-series of Thin Man, but I don't know.
When did you hear that?
I heard it, it was a word on the street. I would say about 2-3 weeks ago at a comic book store. I had brought it up because I was at my local comic book store, Captain Blue Hen, and of course I mentioned that I'm a huge fan of IDW because, you know, IDW and nostalgia go great together. So somebody, who I'm going to rename nameless right now because I don't know how reliable it is, guy said that there was a rumor that IDW was taking suggestions. One of them being Thin Man, because apparently there were other Thin Man fans out there, but I don't know how they would work exactly. I don't know if they would try to.
Well, here's the thing about IDW. I don't know what if they even do it. I don't know what they're gonna do. But if they can make game characters who only grunt and snicker and laugh and not really have any words to say other than a giant emperor pig, I'm sure they could make the Thin Man work. If they can make Angry Birds work in comic form, they can make anything work.
And let's not forget, and I said this in the last retrospective, the Thin Man movies were all about character actors from vaudeville that had mugs. And speaking of Three Stooges, Shemp Howard has a cameo in this movie, I believe.
Does it?
Yes, he does. He's actually, and we'll get to that, but one of my favorite characters is Abner Bieberman as Dum Dum. He's awesome in this.
Yes, he
I mean,
is.
this is when you really have, you know, today you have underwear models, and you just have everybody that's number 12 looks just like you. And back then, people were just like beaten with an ugly stick, and they worked and they acted, and you can hear it in their voices. I mean, they were seasoned, and I feel that, you know, there's no way Johnny Depp could pull William Powell off.
There's no way Johnny Depp could pull Nick Charles off as a character, you know. And I'm not saying that there isn't someone out there in Hollywood that could do William Powell's character justice, but here's the thing. It's the greatest thing about these films. They live on in infamy because of the writing, because of the acting, because of the personalities of the characters. And you see them grow over these 6 films, you know. Some people will say, oh, well, The Thin Man, the original, and The Song of the Thin Man are the only good ones. I slightly disagree. They're all good in varying degrees. I will say that The Thin Man and The Song of the Thin Man are the 2 best, in my opinion. But, you know, I still love them all, and I just don't see... if IDW does this, it'd just be another book I buy from them, because what they can do is they can make it. They don't need to make it a color comic. They can make it a black and white comic.
Oh, it'll definitely work as film noir. Yeah.
And film noir, and they, as long as they have writers that have watched these 6 films and get the characterizations of Nick and Nora down pat, and all the other Gil, Lieutenant Gil and Lieutenant Abrams, and all the regular characters that usually show up that aren't the villains. As long as they get that down pat. And what I would love to see IDW do, if they did this, oh my god! Now that you even told me this, I have so many damn ideas. I would love them to see them in, like, if they do a 6-issue miniseries, or if they did an ongoing, it would be amazing. If they did an ongoing Thin Man book, you could do one mystery. Within that mystery, there's maybe 1 or 2 scenes of Nick, Nora, Nicky Jr., and Asta. Then you can take Asta and spin him out into his own miniseries. I would love... as much as I don't care for Hawkeye's pizza dog issue, I would love to read a comic book with Asta and Mrs. Asta and their adventures. That would be amazing.
It would be. And to trail off for a minute, I do know they have tried this with the dog sidekick. I mean, with Pluto, and it's worked well. Even when they tried it with Married with Children comics in the 90s, Bud had his own spin-off for like a couple issues. I could see Asta and Nora, especially since Nora, we know why she's with Nick, because she came from a stuffy family, and you can tell towards the end she's all about the adventure. Mm-hmm. She doesn't think, she just like jumps in, and it almost costs her a life in song. But this is one of my favorite Nora moments in this movie, especially when we get to that part 2. But I could ask the only complaint they have about him, especially when we get the song, there's only so many times you can see him like run and hide and duck, and you can see in that stop motion animation that they do with him. It's okay for a while, but they would have to do a lot more from him than just like put in his...
No, what I'm saying is, if you had a Thin Man ongoing, and then you split Asta off for a 6-issue miniseries, it would focus on him, Mrs. Asta, and their kids and their adventures. That's what it would focus on, because Asta has all kinds of other adventures outside of even dealing with Nick and Nora.
Okay.
So that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that it would just be, him running around and hiding. I'm saying, make him the starring character of a 6-issue miniseries. That would be awesome. I still have to contact my IDW people and see if this is actually true, because holy crap, that would be amazing. All right, so in this part 2 of the double feature for the Thin Man, we're going to talk about Another Thin Man and Shadow the Thin Man. First up is the trailer for Another Thin Man. We'll be back after this.
Mommy, this is Creep's binder. Remember?
Creeps? Yeah, Creeps, you remember? Nick sent me up the river.
Oh, well, it's nice you don't feel bad about it.
Well, why should I? Gee, it took a genius to outsmart me.
You want to touch me?
I got rid of all those reporters.
What'd you tell them?
Told them we were out of scotch.
What a gruesome thought.
Alright, so first up is Another Thin Man, which is the 1939 third film in the 6-volume series of The Thin Man. Again, stars obviously William Powell and Myrna Loy as Nick and Nora Charles, and is based on the writings of Dashiell Hammett. Their son Nicky Jr. is also introduced in this film. The cast includes their terrier Asta, Virginia Gray, Otto Kruger, C. Aubrey Smith, Ruth Hussey, Nate Pendleton, Patrick Knowles, Sheldon Leonard, Tom Neal, Phyllis Gordon, and Marjorie Main. The basic plot of this one is, and this is again something that is so hilarious to me, like I mentioned in the last episode, in episode 106 of M-Wire, where Nick is always put into positions that he doesn't want to be put into. In the first movie, he didn't want to be bothered with the Wynette case. In the second movie, he, because of the animosity between him and Nora's family, wanted nothing to do with Nora's family. I mean, of course, sure, he's going to step up and do the right thing and what's supposed to be done and catch the murderer. But in this one, it's Colonel or Lieutenant, or I think it's Colonel McVeigh. And apparently this is the guy who Nick is running his finances for him or keeping track. I know Nick says in the beginning of the movie, no, all he's going to have me do is go down there and look at another financial statement. But I'm not sure if it's financial statements for McVeigh or if, I don't know. I didn't quite get the relationship between McVeigh and the Charles family.
I think that they're supposed to be family friends, that Colonel McVeigh and the Charleses go back years. So that's what it's supposed to be. But for finances, I think it's because the Colonel trusts the Charles because he doesn't trust his family so much. So it has to do with he's asked Nick over the years to just double check and look over the finances because he feels that his daughter, which we'll get into, the daughter and the fiance, so, it's one of those,
So that's it then, because I wasn't sure if it was that. I mean, I knew about the daughter and the fiance and all that stuff, but I wasn't sure if it was that or if it was, not that the Colonel could actually do this, but if it was the other way around, where the Colonel was managing Nora's money. But that's kind of stupid because it's already been disproved, because Nick is pretty much the one that takes care of all that. He said it in the first film. Her father died and left her, several other things, and I manage them now. So I can see now, now that you point that out, why McVeigh would turn to Nick. It's interesting. Nick, he's not an. I wouldn't say Nick Charles is an everyman, because not every man is a functioning alcoholic like he is. And they take drinking so light in these movies. I mean, I get it because of the time period and everything else, but if you look at it and that's the other reason why I don't think a updated version of The Thin Man would ever friggin' work, is because of how they approach drinking and how they approach marriage and marital affairs. Back, as we said last time, in the first movie, he basically backhands her to save her from being shot at when Morelli, pops in the apartment. So I honestly think that these movies have way too many themes that nowadays all these conservative groups would find very unappealing. So they're still in New York, because that's where they live. Nora gets a call from McVeigh. He wants them to come down to Long Island. Now, I assume they're in New York City proper. Is it really 2 hours drive from New York City proper to Long Island?
Well, for me, I mean, I was living in Staten Island at the time, so I mean, you would have to go to the Verrazano Bridge to go into Brooklyn to go to Long Island, but from Manhattan, I mean, especially since back then, you didn't have GPSs, and anyway, the whole thing is it's also supposed to be a comedy, that this is supposed to be your typical nervous chauffeur. So the whole idea is that he's nervous, and they want to make this into a dramedy, so they're trying to build up all the suspense about, okay, it's going to take us a couple hours to get to Long Island because all these people coming in and out of the apartment, including this guy who claims that he's maintenance for the apartment, which I love, and it turns out it's a former crook that Nick happened to put in jail. And that's one of the gags that I love, is that we see that there are former criminals that Nick put in jail, but now they're out and they're like the best of friends, and Nick just shrugs it off.
Yeah.
Which is okay.
It's-
It's supposed to, diffuse the tension, I assume. I guess it's supposed to be like with Marx Brothers, where they put everybody into that cabinet at Night of the Opera.
Yeah.
And, of course, we get a stooge. We get Champoward. Because he is also supposed to be an accomplice with this maintenance man who's supposed to help rob the apartment, and then they're trying to make amends, and they find out that Nick and Nora have a kid, so they claim they're going to bring their kids and have this birthday party for Nick and Nora's, for Nicky Jr., which I love.
Yeah, that was a hilarious scene.
And they just bring kids. Like, they're not even theirs. They just happen to bring kids there. And then the cops come, and they go like, okay, like... And Nick is warning these guys to get the kids out of there, so... It's...
Yeah, well, he's warning them to get themselves out of there and take the kids with them.
Yeah.
And in all this confusion, somehow... I forget what the kid's name is, but somehow Nicky Jr. ends up going with one of the crooks, and some Raphael. That's what it was. Because of this stupid woman. Oh, my little Raphael. Oh.
Yeah.
It'd be better if he had a red bandana and a turtle shell.
We're gonna get there next week, but yeah.
So they do this whole baby swap thing. What?
But we get to the thing with the chauffeur, of course, yeah. Get the thing with the chauffeur, of course. And, of course, we see that typical body in the road in Long Island at night, yeah. Which Nick just shrugs off as usual, because he wants nothing to do with it.
Yeah, pretty much.
And then, of course, we get to the classic family, the Colonel McVeigh and suspicious characters. Which, I love Colonel McVeigh. He's played by Audrey Smith, which was a great character actor.
Yeah.
He has an interesting history, too.
Let me guess, he's tied to the Stooges somehow.
What happened?
I said, let me guess, he's tied to the Stooges somehow.
No, he's not tied to the Stooges somehow, but he's also a classic vaudeville actor. Because between him and William Powell, he was this great character. They had some great character timing together, so that's pretty much why he's in the movie. Mm-hmm. Sadly, they kill him off way too early. Because it has to be... He's afraid that somebody's going to kill him because he has all this money and he's leaving it. He may be leaving it to the daughter, but the daughter, of course, has the suspicious fiancé that may or may not be writing a mystery novel. You have, of course, Mr. Church, who we didn't talk about yet, who apparently has these dreams. And every time he dreams, like the third and final dream that he has these premonitions. And every time that he dreams, he feels that somebody that he knows in his travels are going to die. So he has decided to pick the Colonel. And Church, of course, is scary and intimidating by himself because the way he's delivering these lines. And I believe he's Cuban.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, back then, you could go to Cuba. This is before, of course, the Cuban Missile Crisis and everything. So it wasn't uncommon. And, of course, he's got his loyal servant Dum Dum. And Dum Dum, of course, is another great character actor, and he's very loyal to Church. So you have this whole setup of... This is, again, a talking movie, where you can sit and talk in the theater and go, okay, we know the setup. Church has got to be the one who killed McVeigh because Church has mentioned he has all these premonitions. Well, maybe it's Dum Dum because Dum Dum is loyal, and Dum Dum is going to do it so Church doesn't get in trouble. Or maybe it is the fiancé to... Because he's going to be marrying McVeigh's daughter and gain the fortune. So... It's one of those movies where you don't mind when people are talking in the theater and you don't tell them to shut up. Because you don't know who the murderer is and why. Like, what would the real motivation be?
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. And again, I love all of the scenes in this movie. I mean, they're so good. Um, they just are, because you have all this stuff. And a lot of the stuff with the mystery happens outside this film. Like, outside, not like, it's not just, someone going into a building and shooting somebody, or someone hiding in an apartment, or somebody burying a body, under the staircase, or like that chase scene was really cool in the beginning, and then they found the dead dog, which is really sad.
Well, the dog they wanted to do, of course, at that time, it's graphic.
Yeah.
It was graphic then, it's graphic now. But I understand why they did it, to throw,
Yeah.
To cause confusion, which is great. But you can even tell that, once the murderer confesses, they said, we went too far, which is fine. But again, I think the most interesting character in this movie has to go hands down to Dum Dum.
Oh, absolutely. Dum Dum is basically what the You Bet You guy was in the last movie.
Yeah, he has more of a personality. As
Yeah.
well as when we get to the Rio Club scene, where Nora decides that she's going to try to uncover a clue. Because Nora, of course, wants to help. Nora enjoys this fast-paced life. She knows that Nick is retired and he doesn't want to get involved, but she can't wait to get up, and if it were up to her, she would solve the case on her own. She's wrong half the time, but you gotta love her spirit. And I just love when she goes to the Rio Club and she meets this guy who may or may not be able to give her a tip, and all he wants to do is just dance with her. And Nick is just in the club, and he's just sitting there nonchalantly, and he's pretending like he doesn't know Nora. And Nora keeps looking at Nick, and this guy becomes suspicious and jealous and everything. And Nick is just sitting there smoking a cigarette and drinking. And then he sees Dum Dum, and then there's this drunk who's trying to tell something about church, and Dum Dum, of course, being loyal, and we know how loyal Dum Dum is. We've mentioned that. He starts to attack, and then all of a sudden the lights go out, and they come back on, and Nick is dancing with Nora. And I love the line. He's like, "Hello, darling, remember me? It's your husband." And, the pacing in this is amazing, because it does take a while, but it builds and builds, and it pays off.
Oh, so much. I mean, like this was one that, like, with the last one, I had a sneaking suspicion. Even when it had been years since I'd seen After the Thin Man. But I still remember seeing it, and I don't remember everything about it, but I remember that, oh yeah, of course. If you're going to have Mr. It's a Wonderful Life, you got to make him a villain, right? With this one, I was so totally thrown out. Like, I mean, I was all over the place with who I thought could have been the killer. And to find out who it actually is like, oh, wow. Talk about some family drama.
Yeah, and we got to go back to Church as well, because Church is upset. He wants revenge on the McVeigh family because McVeigh was a lawyer, and he accidentally... It's almost like Cape Fear, where the lawyer sent the guy to jail and didn't have all the information, and, there was a hiccup here and there. And that's the same thing with Church, is that Church is upset because of the hiccup. So you figure he's going to have revenge on the family, but then Church disappears and he's dead. So we don't know now who the murderer is. And I feel that builds up the suspense more and more. Usually the twist ending today is a dime a dozen, but but back then it really keeps you on your toes. With all these build-ups and pacing back then, there is a gigantic payoff. And I feel that you're killing the person who you thought was the murderer, and rightfully so, is now gone. You think Dum Dum is going to come in and, get revenge. No, he's just still trying to protect Church's name. Dum Dum is going to be as loyal as ever, which is amazing. So now we don't know who it is, and now we find out there's this person named Linda Mills, who happens to be another girlfriend of Church, who we don't know what her story is.
No, we don't.
And then, of course, we get to that great scene where Nora finally gets the help, and she gets the help the correct way, where they go to this apartment, and Nora brings Asta, and Nick goes, but of course they pretend like they don't know each other. Like she's going to rent an apartment, and he's going to rent an apartment, and they're going to go to two separate apartments. And I love this scene because this is the one where Nick is just looking around, and all of a sudden there's a guy who comes in through a window, and he has his back to Nick. I mean, Nick, his back, and the guy has the gun to Nick's back, and Nick is just like, he doesn't get scared, doesn't break a sweat, doesn't get nervous. He just is like looking at books.
Yep.
It's like this is typical Nick.
Well, yeah, it is very typical of Nick Charles because you got to think of it though. They established in the first movie, for years and years and years and years and years, I mean, for at least several years, maybe 5, 10, 15 years, he had been a detective. He then at some point in those years met Nora, probably close to the end of it, and, as I alluded to earlier, he even jokes about it. Dear, I married you for your money, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, but Nick had already been a detective for years upon years before ever meeting Nora. So him going back to do the work in the detective work in these films, of course he's not going to, like jump up and scream or have a knee-jerk reaction about someone coming up behind him and putting a gun in his back, because it's probably happened to him a million times before.
Yeah, but again, the audience who just started to watch this, they hear about it. But they never really get to see it because there aren't any prequels to be, how they met, which is fine because this is a movie, not a TV series. And that's great. I mean, they never really do a prequel or a flashback of how Nick and Nora met or what Nick was, They never did a young Thin Man series, which is great.
Well, right, but what I'm saying is you don't need a prequel. You don't need to see how they met. What I'm saying is, in the first movie, they took all of the establishment in one line when he said, "Oh, I was a detective for many years, and then I met and married Nora, and now I take care of her money. I'm retired." He kept saying that the entire film. I'm retired. So it's already set up. So by the time you get to this film, Another Thin Man, you realize that, oh, hey, him not doing anything when a gun is put into his back is because of all the years he had already been doing detective work.
Oh yeah, I agree. It's just that it's still funny regardless, even though he says it.
Oh no, it is. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's still a great joke, and it still eases the tension. But we also, of course, get that Nick, because of his years, he still has the upper hand. He, instead of trying to knock the gun out, he just called his police friends, and they just came in, which is great. And we find out that Linda Mills, of course, is an alias, as anything would be in any detective story. And Nick and Nora get their information and they go. Now, I still have to go back to that fiance because you figure, okay, it's got to be him because he claims he's writing a mystery novel, yet every time it's brought up, he doesn't really want to talk about it. And then he just disappears. Like, he doesn't die or anything. He just, he goes away after a while. And then all of a sudden he'll come back.
The fiance is more of an enigma than Gilbert was creepy in the first movie, because Gilbert was off the wall nuts. Dorothy's brother in the first film,
right?
But yeah, I mean, they basically set up that same type of character where you don't know what is, I guess technically the fiance could be more aligned with, more compared to Chris Jorgensen, because we didn't know half the crap. The entire movie, we didn't know anything about him until the very end, pretty much.
Exactly, and of course, there's one thing I almost forgot. Church also threatens Nick if he doesn't leave the case, because he starts giving his premonitions of what could happen to Nick, and Nick of course doesn't take that lightly and just finally smacks Church around a few times. But with Church out of the picture, we don't have many suspects left except for this enigmatic Lois Mills, that's right, which of course we find out who Linda is. And of course we have that typical, you can't have a Thin Man without bringing all the suspects into one room and going, okay, I know what happened and why, and here's how it goes.
I still, as much as I love all these movies, I don't know about Shadow, which we'll be talking about here in a little while. I don't know about the other two, which be talking about next time. But so far in the three films that we've had to this point, I still think the dinner scene in the first film is the best one of revealing who the murderer was. I like the one in After the Thin Man. This one, I liked it, but I don't think the characters were as I want to say bright. I don't think they were as colorful as the cast of potential suspects that we had in The Thin Man.
No, you're never going to be able to go back to that dinner scene. I mean, that you're never going to be able to top it. And the problem is that when we get to, I think, Thin Man Goes Home, Murloy at one point just says, well, this is what always happens. Nick deduces, he gets all the facts, he brings all the suspects in, and then eventually towards the end there's a gunshot. It's so exciting. And I can, you can tell how excited Nora is. But this one, unfortunately, Nick, I don't think that he's phoning it in. I wouldn't say that. I would just say that in this case, once you kill off Church, and that Dum Dum, as loyal as he is, he not to say that he lives by his name. He's just a very loyal person, and we'll leave it at that. It had to be somebody that you didn't think, and unfortunately, the person that I go gasp who it is. I have to say I'm disappointed in the motivation of why that person turned out to be the killer. Because to me, it just feels like it's something out of a serial.
Yeah, I mean, when you really think about it, as I said earlier, I didn't think that kind of twist was going to come, that it was going to be, I mean, we might as well just say it's his daughter.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't see that coming, but now looking back on it, not saying that the movie is bad because of it, but it should have almost been predictable. I mean...
I don't know if you ever seen the movie The Hudsucker Proxy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to be doing that at some point. I don't know when, but we are.
I love that movie because... oh God, I forget her name right now. That plays Amy Adams. It's not Barbara Hershey.
Amy Adams is the name of the actress, I think.
Oh, it is?
I'll have to look it up. But anyway,
yeah, Amy Archer. Continue. Amy Archer, yeah. And the point being is that she Lois talks like Amy Archer from Hudsucker Proxy. That when she drops the good daughter, she starts talking, on the side of her mouth, and she became a mall because she was tired of being goody two shoes, and she didn't mind having her dog killed to throw people off the case, and that's all okay, but it doesn't feel like a solid Thin Man ending to me. It just feels like, Nick is like, oh, Long Island is relaxing. I've been to Long Island. I hear what you're saying. I mean, it would be great for a setup for a murder. I just feel that the first act is solid. The second act is solid. The third act are tripping. And then, of course, you have that thing where they go back to their own apartment and you think that she kidnapped Nicky Jr. But it just turns out because all these, former thugs brought these kids over to celebrate Nicky Jr.'s birthday, and then they're all leaving. One of them grabbed the wrong kid. So Nicky Jr. was okay all along. It diffuses tension again, but it just feels like they want to wrap everything up under a bow. It's still a good movie. It's watchable. It's just not one of the more solid ones.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. I do like the scene at the beginning of the movie where the chauffeur is driving them down, and Nick sees the body, and then when they get to the spot where the body was, he's like, "I could have sworn I saw a body here." Oh well. Yeah, I love that whole scene. I thought that was amazing.
And again, great performances by the Colonel and Dum Dum and Smitty, and even the drunk who's trying to tip off Nick, and that jealous dancer that Nora's trying to get information from. I mean, it's a great cast and great line reads. It's just, unfortunately, I'm not going to say you can't top the first movie, and we are going to break down like what my favorite sequels are when we're done with the song. But I would say right now, out of the three we've talked about right now, between After and Another, I would go with After still. After, the Thin Man, yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, Another is good. It shows a different side of Nick and... I mean, it shows, same Nick and Nora, but it shows them because it's a slightly different environment than what we had in the first two films. It's a little bit more interesting for me to see how they're going to react and what they're going to do in this one. The overall plot, though, like I said, the daughter being the culprit all along. I should have seen it coming. I didn't. But overall, Another, it's good. It's not a bad movie by any stretch of the imagination. So I think we are going to go find the shadow of the Thin Man after the trailer. We'll be back in a moment.
I hope you get out of it all right.
Thanks, lady. Good night.
Wait till I tell the family I met Nick Charles and Mrs. Charles. This is Mrs. Charles, isn't it?
Now, that's the way we check in at motels.
No one will get a word out of me, Nick. It's okay, honey.
Okay, let's go.
Mama goes home.
Oh, Nicky, you click better when I'm around.
Not in a men's shower. I'll tell you what. You go home, cold cream that lovely face, slip into an exciting negligee.
Yes.
And I'll see you at breakfast.
All right, we are back, and it is time for Shadow of the Thin Man. It's the fourth of the six Thin Man films. It was released in 1941 and was directed by W.S. Van Dyke. As always, starring Myrna Loy and William Powell as Nick and Nora Charles. It also features Barry Nelson as Paul Clark, Donna Reed as Molly. Wow.
Yeah.
If that's the same... Is that the same Donna Reed that I'm... Yep, Donna Reed show. Wow. I think. Let's see who else is in here. Sam Levine as Lieutenant Abrams. Alan Baxter as Whitey Barrow. Henry O'Neill as Major Jason Scully. Anyone you want to mention?
Well, I believe Dean Stockwell is in this as a young Nicky Jr.
No, he's not.
Oh, he's not in this one?
Dean doesn't show up until Song.
Oh, Song. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, Dean doesn't show up till Song. In this one, Nick and Nora are looking for a relaxing day at a racetrack. I don't know anyone that would go to a racetrack for a relaxing day. I mean...
Well, again, I have to say, racetracks for me as a kid, we lived in Brooklyn and Staten Island. We knew a lot of people who owned a few horses. So we enjoyed it. It was relaxing when you got to go behind and get to pet the horses and whatnot and feed them. You know what? If you don't want to gamble, you can just watch them run. It's okay. It's 50-50.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess. I just... When I think of a relaxing day, I think of, like, the beach or, something that doesn't have a lot of noise in it. That's what I think of.
Just the Kentucky Derby is probably the noisiest. If you go, like, when you don't have the Triple Crown, you're not going to get a bad crowd. And it's not as noisy. I mean, maybe towards anyone who really is an obsessive gambler nowadays at the racetrack, they stay inside where they have all the OTB.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so they, on the outside when watching the horses run, yeah, it's fine.
Yep. So in this one, we get so they're at the track. One of the jockeys gets shot, and of course, Lieutenant Abrams requests Nick's help. And the trail leads to a gambling syndicate that operates out of a wrestling arena. Wow, that is a cliche. Oh my god, that's a huge coincidence.
You know, I when I looked at the back of the DVD box and they bring up like the famous wrestling scene, I was so unimpressed what they did. I thought there was going to be some sort of payoff with it. It just deals with Nora's interested. And of course, wrestling was different back then, I assume, than it is today, of course. But,
Oh, yeah.
but I love the fact how there was a great Nora moment where she goes to the end of the ring and she decides to say goodnight to the two wrestlers. And she's just trying to be polite to them. And she just walks away. Like, she just, Nora's in Nora's world, which is fine. It's a cute scene, but there's really no payoff with the wrestling because they make it out to be like it's the most important scene in the movie, but there's really nothing to it.
Yeah, that's true. I think it's more so of a backdrop than anything else. I mean, they had to set the movie against something, and the first part of it is all about the jockey being murdered. So it's dealing with some sort of every bit of this movie is dealing with some sort of sport, whether it's sports gambling, whether it's wrestling, whether it's horse racing. So, I mean, I don't mind it at all, really.
Well, it was going to happen sooner or later because Nick, of course, as we said, is a detective, and of course, it's going to deal with the mafia and dealing with a crooked, gambling ring. Eventually, this was going to happen in some sort of Thin Man movie. To do it as a comedy, though, for me, the only comedy in the 40s, or the 30s, I should say, that I really enjoyed when it came to horse racing was A Day at the Races with the Marx Brothers. I'm not saying that, because it's a Thin Man, it's a dramedy, and it's not a bad one. It's an interesting plot. I do appreciate the fact of how they're trying to get to the races, and because a jockey was shot to get an escort, and I love how Nora just goes, oh, wow, they're really strict around here, because the jockey was killed, and they don't know the reason why. Of course, we find out it's a typical because he wouldn't throw a race. And, of course, we get, Nick, we need your help, but of course he refuses, and, we get Whitey Barrow, the reporter and a rival, is blackmailing, a girlfriend. It's all typical that I've seen in the previous. Out of all the Thin Man movies, I just have to say, this one did not hold my interest as much, and I'm just going to make this clear right here and right now. It's not the worst in the bunch. I don't think there's a worse Thin Man movie. This one just feels like they didn't know what to do. Like they wanted to bring the characters back in a story. They just weren't too sure what we could do or what we should do, and we'll just bring in racketeering and crooked gambling.
Right, yeah. I mean, there's so many different things that are going on here. And yeah, no, when we rank these, it's not going to be from best to worst. It's going to be from, what we liked, like which ones we liked the best. And Shadow of the Thin Man, it's getting to be, this movie for me is kind of like middle of the road. It's not good, but it's not awful. It's just kind of there.
Yeah.
There are a lot of great moments with Nick and Nora. There really are. But having a detective story in and around, gambling and, racing and wrestling, it doesn't really hold up. And when I say it doesn't hold up, I mean the plot doesn't hold up in my mind, not necessarily the movie. Like, I'm not comparing this to today's movie standards, because today's movie standards do this kind of plot all the time, and they make millions of dollars because people just don't know how to watch a good movie sometimes.
The biggest problem I had, too, were the transition wipes in this movie, because there is a moment where Nora is using her binoculars to see if Nick is spending time with Nicky Jr., and Nick doesn't. It's not that he doesn't know how to be a good father. He's just. I don't know if he realizes what he really has to do to be a father, because he wants to spend time with Nicky Jr., but he doesn't really know how to bond. So he's trying to read a story, and he realizes it's not working. So he decides to read a race form. And well, first we think that he's going to tell Nicky Jr. a case that he was on. That's the way that I saw it. I thought that the way that he was telling the story to Nicky Jr. and the way the transition wipe goes in, it's a flashback. He's telling like one of my cases that I was with Nora. But no, it just goes back to Nora on the balcony looking at binoculars, and we see Nick and Nicky Jr. like there's no flashback. It's just Nick saying to Nicky Jr., once upon a time there were 6 horses. There were green ones and red ones and orange ones, and he's talking about the numbers on the horses, and the cloths that they wear to determine which horse is what in a race. And even Nicky Jr. picks up on that. And Nick, of course, has his classic ha-ha laugh. But there's also on the back of the DVD box this much talked about scene where Nick is on the carousel with his son. And this is where I feel a scene really has nothing to do with anything. This is filler. I understand that they want to have Nick bond with Nicky Jr., which is great. I understand how you have like these spoiled brat, rich, stereotypical kids that are making fun of him. And I love how Asta and Nick are on the carousel. What bothers me is that once he gets off, he's getting dizzy. Here's my argument, though. This is a guy who drinks every now and then and smokes. You would figure he'd be used to these buzzes. I don't understand what the comic setup of him going on the carousel and getting scared on going on the horse or whatever, and you have this spoiled brat kid who keeps sticking out his tongue and calling Nick a chicken. There's no payoff to it. And what's worse is that Asta's just, again, on the ride, and you have that stop motion where he's hiding his leg over his face. I feel that, and this goes with sitcoms as well, is that once you bring a kid into a franchise, usually the kid is going to downplay the characters, and it's going to be focused on the kid. You don't know what to do with him. And with Nicky Jr., they really didn't know what to do with him in this movie. It's they need to solve a case. I mean, in the last movie, he was a baby, of course. They try to have him set up where he's going to be kidnapped, and we realize that it doesn't work. In this one, they're trying to bond with him, but it just takes away from the mystery. And it has nothing to do with anything. He's never going to jump in. He's not going to be Scrappy-Doo. So I understand that they want to use it for continuity, but you're never going to see him do anything else, especially in the next movie where he's in boarding school. So you can tell he didn't work out.
Yeah. I still think the best scene for Asta that has ever been in these movies, okay, 2 best scenes are one is in After the Thin Man, when we see him come home to Mrs. Asta, and clearly Mrs. Asta cheated on him. And then the other scene that I absolutely love with Asta actually has more to do with Nick than Asta, but it's in the first Thin Man movie where I think he comes up against Tanner, and Nick's like, "Be careful, that dog will tear you to shreds," and Asta just runs and hides.
Yeah.
I mean, I absolutely love that scene. I thought that was great. But now that I've watched Shadow of the Thin Man again, I still love these movies as an enjoyable watch. But looking at it critically, I don't know. It just...
Well, here's the thing. On a professional opinion, I would say that these movies, they want to bring back the characters because we love the characters. And we'll accept nobody else but William Powell and Maura Lloyd to play these 2 characters. We've fallen in love with them. It's not a television series. It's a movie series, so we have to put them in something. We just don't know what other cases we could give them, especially since we know the setup. Nick is retired. He's going to be forced to do something he doesn't want to do. He's going to want to walk around and drink. He wants to enjoy his retirement, but his wife, because she's lived this humdrum life wants to go in and you know, she wants action, she wants excitement, and if Nick goes in and solves a case, he'll do it his way, and then at the end, he's starting to act like a detective, and he knows that the murder was within 5 minutes to 15 minutes, but we have to have, 75 minutes of plot and scenes before we get to the murder and why and motivation, and it gets really, really hard to drag that out in, 2 more movies. Now the last 2 I can't wait to talk about. But if I can trail off even with Marx Brother movies or, Three Stooges, there's only so many times you can bring back the characters and put them in a situation before you realize that 90-minute mark is getting, longer and longer, and you don't know what these characters should say or what they should do to make it interesting anymore.
Yeah, that's so very true.
And the murder in this case, it gets convoluted because you have this sweet but naive woman who's trying to go undercover as a secretary, and her fiance, of course, is always the fiance that's bland. He's trying to get his hands on a notebook so he can bring this mob boss to justice, and it just gets so convoluted, and everything it's like the carousel that it spins around and you get dizzy. And it's like, stop it, I just want to get off.
Absolutely. And was this whole thing with the fiance just to make... I don't get why he was even a suspect, because at the end of the whole thing, Nick says, so how is your ending coming? Oh, well, I haven't quite gotten there yet. And Nick basically says, well, let me see if I can give something to... Like, seriously, was this whole thing of him, trying to write this thing or whatever he was doing, was it really, all about plagiarism? Seriously? It's just, I don't know. The whole angle with the fiance was just lame in this movie, honestly.
I just feel that they want to go back to the murder mystery of the late 1800s, like 1890s murder mysteries. 10 little Indians, and everybody's, got a past, and everybody's going to pay. But it just, then you have the Roaring Twenties, and then you have the gangsters, and it just, it's not working as much as it did 2 Thin Man movies ago. And Nora, as much as I love her, she's not irritating, but again, I fear for her because she's not experienced. And at one point, she's ready to jump and take a bullet for Nick, which is noble. I'll give her that. But I don't want her to go away, and that's the one thing I get scared about the more I watch these movies, because I hadn't watched them in a long time. And I was afraid that every time she butts in or whatever, and she wants to help. I mean, we get the fact how she really does want to help. And I love how they're interrogating, like Nora goes, okay, that guy, I know he was the murderer along. No, you're right, Nick, that guy was the murderer. You knew about it, and so did I. I love all that. This one, she's ready, when the murderer's ready to kill Nick, she jumps in front of that bullet. I did not know what was going to happen to Nora. I mean, Nick kind of knows because he just sits in the distance. We know that in the last movie. This one, he doesn't... I mean, as you said, in one of them, he has to slap Nora so she doesn't get hurt.
In the first film,
In the first one, yeah. But this one is kind of like, I don't remember him even trying to jump in front of Nora when Nora's trying to jump in front of him. But then it kind of like, oh, well, there weren't any bullets in the gun.
Yeah. I think the whole thing about this movie is that it's a role reversal for them. Like, sure, Nick is doing all the detective work like he always has been, but she's the one that wants to protect him this time, so I think it's more of a role reversal than anything else. I don't mind it, I think it's great, but the whole plot setting, as I've already said, and I think we're pretty much done with this one, but the whole plot setting is just ridiculous. It really is.
Yeah, this was just like something out of a 1930s serial that you would see in the movies for like 10 minutes.
I mean, it would have been different if they had done something like have them... I hate to say this, but we brought this up earlier, or you did when you were talking about noise. It would have been almost better if they got on a train and went to Churchill Downs here in Louisville, Kentucky, honestly. I mean, it would have been better if this was like a jockey killed at the Derby.
Yeah, I mean, they don't even, they just let that go. The same thing with the wrestling. They just show it for the sake of showing it, and then that's it.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. We're going to take a quick break, go to some ads from our partner podcast, and we'll be back after this with final ratings on Another Thin Man and Shadow of the Thin Man. We'll be back after this.
Hello, geeks. Want a podcast that covers a vast array of topics with no rhyme or reason? Then check out Altered Geek Unlimited, where the topics fly more or less off the cuff. We cover media news, TV, our favorite geek products, and of course, your feedback. So get altered, get geeky with the Altered Geeks every Friday on the Geekcast Radio Network.
Alright, so we are back here on M-Wire, episode 108, The Thin Man Double Feature Part 2. And it is time to rate Another Thin Man and Shadow of the Thin Man. On the GCRN Universal Rating System, what are you going to be giving Another Thin Man, sir?
You know what? I'm going to be fair, because I do appreciate the atmosphere. I appreciate the characters. I appreciate the character actors. And I appreciate the fact that this one does not go without a fight, even though it does trip over the finish line with the whodunit. I'm going to be generous and give a 3.
Okay. And just for those of you who don't know, the link will be in the show notes, but just for those of you who don't know, 3 stars out of 5 on our scale is entitled Barely Passing. While the overall takeaway was positive, you do not necessarily walk away happy. It does not extraordinarily succeed in any specific areas. If it does, it gets weighed down by something as equally unsuccessful, though overall enjoyable, is easily disposable. For me, I'm going to give it 3.5, which is liked it. Issues are certainly prevalent, but so are the successes. Typically, there is one specific area of extraordinary achievement or multitude of quality moments that make the negative aspects relatively easy to accept. I'm giving it 3.5 out of 5 because it's Another Thin Man is, like I said, it's middle of the road. It really is. It's not horrible. It's not amazing. It's just kind of there. Now, on the other hand, the Shadow of the Thin Man, ladies and gentlemen, I didn't think I was gonna I love these movies, watching them as a kid, as a young adult, and even now as an older adult. I honestly never thought I would come to this end of the universal rating system here at the GCRN, but for me, I have to give this 2.5 out of 5, which is barely failing. The cons slightly outweigh the pros. While the negatives aren't overbearing, they are far too plentiful to make it worthy of a recommend. There may be certain redeeming qualities that are worth your time. However, the end product leaves you wanting more. What about you for Shadow of the Thin Man?
It's going to break my heart for this one, and on a professional level, I have to give this one a 1.5. And that's me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and you know why? This is, out of all of them, this one just the air was out of the tires. There was nothing to it. They didn't know where they wanted to go with this one. And this one is, the more I think about it, now that I collected my thoughts, this one is the weakest link.
So what are you going to rate this one?
I'm going to give this one a 1.5. On a professional opinion, this one really is the weakest link of the Thin Man movies. I mean, this one just took a punch and didn't get up even before the count of 10. The airs are let out of the tires. They don't know what it wants to be. Do they want to care about the kid? Do they want to have Nick bond with his son? Do they want to be about crooked gamblers with sports? They don't know. It goes everywhere, and there's no payoff. I feel, as I said, with Nick going on a carousel, getting off and getting sick, if I never have to watch a Thin Man sequel again, it will definitely be Shadow.
Okay. Yeah, I pretty much agree. Alright, so coming up next time on M-Wire, we will wrap up the Thin Man coverage with the double feature part 3, where we talk about The Thin Man Goes Home and Song of the Thin Man. What do you got coming up on Hunt Outcast?
Well, Wyatt and I are going to be discussing... We finished up Giant Robot Month this month, and now we're going to be talking about Gamera, as well as Ultraman. And I've come across, since I've seen Guardians of the Galaxy... Howard the Duck comics, and believe me, they're a lot better than the 80s movie. So we're going to be doing that and having us, because we did have a Transformers versus Bayformers discussion. I feel a Howard the Duck versus the Howard the Duck of the 70s discussion coming up very soon. And of course, in September, we got Mothra Month. So we got a lot going on.
Yep. Awesome. All right. That's going to do it for this episode of M-Wire. Keep those film reels rolling, and we will catch you next time.
Let's sit down.
Sit down. What for?
Just to get a little rest after our quiet weekend in the country. Oh.
You've just listened to Movie Week in Review on GeekCastRadio.com. If you would like to leave feedback on the show, there are many ways to do so. First, you can visit the website, GeekCastRadio.com, where you can comment on the episode and all of our different podcasts. Be sure to rate our show on iTunes and leave us feedback. You can follow us on Twitter at GCRNMWire. Become a fan of us on Facebook by searching Geekcast Radio Network. You can email us at feedback@geekcastradio.com. Call the voicemail line 502-526-5821. Please remember to tell us the show you're leaving the message for and your name. So until next time, unleash the geek in you.
In a world, there, I said it, happy,